Estadio Hernando Siles in La Paz, Bolivia, stands out as one of the most formidable venues in world football. Situated at nearly 12,000 feet above sea level, it's more than just a stadium. It's a fortress where Bolivia has crafted some of its proudest footballing moments, thanks to the unique advantage that high altitude brings. Over the years, this advantage has become deeply woven into Bolivia's footballing identity, turning Estadio Hernando Siles into a site of national pride and dramatic, unexpected upsets against some of the strongest teams in the world. Playing at such an extreme altitude is a challenge that begins the moment teams arrive in La Paz. At 12,000 feet, oxygen levels drop significantly, with the air containing roughly 35% less oxygen than at sea level. For players and teams unaccustomed to these conditions, every breath feels shallow and insufficient. Each sprint becomes exhausting after only a few steps, and fatigue sets in far sooner than they expect. Former Argentine star Juan Román Riquelme once described playing in La Paz as feeling like he had lungs full of cotton. In another famous moment, Neymar Jr. shared a photo of himself wearing an oxygen mask after a particularly exhausting match, showing just how taxing the thin air can be even for world-class athletes. Visiting players frequently report symptoms like dizziness, shortness of breath, and even nausea as their bodies struggle to adapt to the thin air. Coaches have been known to adjust tactics, asking players to slow their pace and avoid high-energy bursts that would quickly drain their reserves. For many teams, a game in La Paz is as much about survival as it is about strategy. For Bolivian players, however, this environment is simply home. Most grow up in high-altitude conditions, developing a natural adaptation to the thin air that allows them to handle La Paz's environment with far greater ease. Unlike their opponents, who struggle with breathlessness and rapid fatigue, Bolivian players don't need special acclimatization routines. They're accustomed to operating with less oxygen in each breath from a young age. Instead, Bolivian training focuses on maximizing the endurance and physicality that comes with this adaptation. High-intensity interval training and strength exercises help them refine their ability to play with an aggressive style, knowing they can recover more quickly than visiting players. Bolivian teams are also known for training at an even higher intensity to boost lung capacity and cardiovascular endurance, conditioning that allows them to push the pace against fatigued opponents. This natural edge transforms the Bolivian team's adaptation into a powerful home field advantage, letting them fully exploit the physical challenges of playing at such a high altitude. This advantage has helped Bolivia achieve some of its most memorable and historic victories on the pitch. In 1993, during the World Cup qualifiers, Bolivia faced Brazil, a footballing giant with an undefeated record in over 40 years of qualifiers, and managed to defeat them 2-0. This was the first time in history that Brazil lost a World Cup qualifier, and it sent shockwaves through the footballing world. The Brazilian players, accustomed to sea-level training, struggled visibly with the altitude, while Bolivia, used to these harsh conditions, pressed their advantage. The Bolivian team's fitness and stamina, along with the psychological edge of playing in familiar conditions, carried them to a historic victory that fans still celebrate to this day. For Bolivia, that game wasn't just a victory. It was proof of the power of Estadio Hernando Siles and the strength that their home advantage gives them. Perhaps even more remarkable was Bolivia's 6-1 victory over Argentina in 2009. Argentina arrived in La Paz brimming with confidence, certain they could handle the altitude, but the match turned out to be a disaster for the visitors. From the start, Bolivia took control, playing with an intensity and tempo that Argentina struggled to match. By halftime, Argentina's players were visibly exhausted, and Bolivia continued to capitalize on the psychological and physical toll of the altitude. In a resounding display, Bolivia dominated the game, with the final scoreline a stunning 6-1 victory. The match remains one of the most talked about upsets in football history, and it's a point of immense pride for the Andean country. Over the years, Bolivia has earned a series of impressive results at home, often surprising regional rivals like Chile, Uruguay, and Colombia, with narrow victories or hard-fought draws. These results highlight just how much of a leveling factor altitude can be, making Estadio Hernando Siles a place where the usual power dynamics of South American football are disrupted. For Bolivian fans, the stadium is a source of national pride, representing their team's resilience and ability to face off against some of the region's strongest sides. Of course, this unique home advantage hasn't been without controversy. In 2007, FIFA attempted to impose a ban on international matches at stadiums located over 2,500 meters, about 8,200 feet above sea level, citing health and safety concerns for players unaccustomed to such conditions. The decision faced fierce opposition from countries where altitude is an unavoidable part of life, particularly Bolivia, Ecuador, and Peru. For Bolivia, the ban felt like an attack on their football identity. The Bolivian government, along with fans and the country's footballing community, strongly protested. President Evo Morales even held an exhibition match at the stadium to demonstrate the safety of playing in La Paz, bringing together politicians, players, and fans to defend their right to compete on home soil. After months of backlash and impassioned protests, FIFA ultimately lifted the ban, allowing Bolivia to retain their right to play at altitude and keep the advantage of their home field. For Bolivian players, training and competing at high altitude isn't just a matter of necessity, it's a source of identity and pride. The stamina and endurance they build playing in thin air become integral parts of their style and strategy, giving them an edge that they embrace on and off the field. Growing up at altitude means they don't need to adjust to La Paz's conditions. Instead, they're able to play at their best and use their adaptation to push the limits against teams struggling just to keep up. And while this altitude advantage has given them a powerful edge at home, it also presents challenges when they play away games, where they must adapt to playing without the advantage they're accustomed to. Bolivia's performance in away games has been inconsistent, highlighting how crucial altitude is to their success. Despite these challenges, the legacy of Estadio Hernando Siles lives on as a symbol of Bolivia's unique place in the world of football. With its dramatic Andean backdrop and its thin, challenging air, the stadium represents Bolivia's ability to harness their environment, turning it into a source of pride and power. The victories achieved there, against the odds and the world's best teams, have etched the stadium into football history, proving that sometimes the strength of home is the greatest advantage of all.